Hi, this is Carrie with Carrie Concealed in the Active Self-Protection Extra channel. And this is part 4 of our series, A Good Friend's Guide to a Great Range Experience. And this part 4 is titled Random Instructor Hacks.
Lucky Gunner is my recommended trusted provider of Freedom seeds for range or defensive use. In stock, good prices, and rocket fast shipping are why I go back again and again. Because of new guidelines, I can't link their site or say it, but you're smart and you can find it with a simple Google search. Stick it to the man by paying them a visit today.
I don't know about you, but I'm guessing that one of the things that as instructors we want to help our students create or our learners create, or even those of you, like I mentioned in the first video in this series, when I took a class from Masada years ago, he explained that once you take a class in learning how to protect yourself or take this topic seriously, you'll often have friends who will ask you if you'll take them to the range. So a lot of us end up being instructors, whether we really know that or call ourselves that or not. But whenever I'm teaching someone about the principles of shooting or of self-protection, I want to train competent decision makers. And I want their confidence to be founded in their competence. So the question is, what's the best way to do that? And that's something that as a career educator, I have searched and searched and searched for different ways. And I'm always looking for new or better ways to help people learn what they want to learn. So science tells us that the key to learning is in something called, or the key to getting learning to stick is in something called desirable difficulties. And that term was coined by Professor Robert Bork at UCLA. And he explains, I was going to read you the definition of what he calls desirable difficulties. So he says desirable difficulties are the difficulties in the learning process, in the normal learning process, are good for us. Difficulties help us learn and they help the learning stick. Learning takes place at the appropriate level of challenge, and the challenge for the individual learner is when they're training at the outer edges of their skill level. There's some friction and struggle, and that's the learning zone where learning is actually going to take place, and most likely it's going to stick because we were training at the outer edges of our skill level. So I remember many classes I took when I first started learning to protect myself. Some of them, I won't say who taught them or what organizations they were through or what have you, but some of them, it seemed like the goal was to teach us everything possible about firearms, or handguns in this case, before we even held one, or before we went out and shot them, or had experience with them. And I'm not knocking any organization at all. As a matter of fact, I'm very thankful that this organization has written these resources for us. But this was the one that was used when I first went through my NRA course, Basics of Pistol Shooting. Then this is the next one that came out. I believe this was in 2009, 2014, and I think this newest iteration was in 2019, I believe. So 2009, 14, and 19. And they're thick. There's lots of great information in these and lots of great pictures. And they're a phenomenal resource. And the NRA Basic Pistol class is an 8-hour class. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that class at all. Their desire is to involve the people taking the class, to involve the students in the class. And the instructors are typically well-intentioned and they want to help their learners learn. The question I asked myself is, I've never taught an NRA basic pistol class. And the reason I've never taught one is if I was going to teach one and advertise it as such, I would not, in good faith, be able to stick with that curriculum for the students that come to me. The students that come to me, that's not the first class they need. They need many steps before that, before they're ready for something that covers that much information. So where was I going to go from there? Oh, yes, we were going to talk about, again, I'm not knocking the NRA. I promise you I'm not knocking the NRA. But the question is there a more efficient method? Is there a way that we can use the science of learning and use those principles to help us learn better ourselves and to help us help those that we're teaching? So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the difference between behavior training and decision training. This is a little booklet. I'll put it up nice and close, that I believe you can order on Amazon, and it was written by Dr. Vickers, and Dr. Vickers wrote some articles with Dr. Lewinsky from Force Science Institute. But in this book, it's not geared towards shooting at all. It's geared towards sports and a variety of sports. But I'll tell you the difference between behavior training and decision training. So most instructors are behavior training instructors, and behavior training focuses on observable actions and how to perform them through repetition, or often through repetition. So let's just say the opposite. The opposite of that is decision training. And decision training emphasizes the cognitive skills like problem solving and adaptability. So I'll give you an example of a difference between decision training and behavior training. And I think often you'll see a combination of the two in any given situation. But personally, I want to lean more toward decision training, because when my students leave me, if they come and take a basic handgun class from me, I want them to not only know how to handle that handgun when they're on the range, but also how to handle it at home. Anytime they have that gun in their hand, I want them to know how to handle it. So just an example, during a safety briefing, an instructor that's leaning more toward behavior training would use the safety rule, something along the lines of never point the muzzle at anything you don't want to destroy. That's the berm. We're going to keep the gun pointed that way. My question is, well, what about when they're at home? And those are questions I had when I first started learning how to protect myself and those I love. Decision training, on the other hand, might use something, a decision training instructor, a decision training focused instructor, might use something like, always keep the muzzle pointed in the direction of least consequence. What constitutes a direction of least consequence? And we ask the students, what is a direction of least consequence? What does that mean? Well, here at the range, that means that everybody turns and looks, because we're doing the safety brief on the range or within view of the range, so that students can better remember. And everybody looks at the berm or the backstop, and we talk about that. And then what is a direction of least consequence in your home? And I've heard Miss Steph say this many times at the Girl and a Gun National Conference. She'll say, just think for a minute. What is a direction of least consequence in your home? What would stop a bullet if that firearm happened to discharge because you were, we won't make any comments about any firearm manufacturers right now, but if, let's say, someone had an unexpected or unplanned discharge because their finger was on the trigger, in what direction would that muzzle need to be pointed in order for that round to stop inside whatever that was? And we talk about how bullets travel through construction material like butter, and because it depends on the construction material. If you have cinder block walls, it might be a little bit different with a handgun. But anyway, but you can see the difference between a behavior trainer or an instructor that's focused on behavior training, and then an instructor that's focused on decision training. So I mentioned at the beginning the gentleman named Marcus Wynn, and a long time ago, probably 2014 or 2015, I stumbled across a blog post of his that was called Random Instructor Hacks. And there will be a link to that in the description for you, to a PDF that contains a cut and paste of that, because I don't think his blog is still on the internet. At least it wasn't a couple years ago when I looked. Maybe somebody's put it back up. I hope they did. But anyway, so it's a PDF of it. But what he talks about is, he says, instructors, if you're working one-on-one with a student and you go to the range with them, you're responsible for their safety on the range. And he explains, like we talked about in the last video, that we want to build a basic cognitive framework. We want that framework to be built on experience so that the learners can hang the abstractions and lectures about the topic on that framework. And so that's a quote directly from Marcus Wynn that's in that Random Instructor Hacks. So Marcus Wynn says, the only safety briefing that an absolute beginner needs, that you're working with and standing side by side, one-on-one with, is just to tell them, do what I do, and that's it at this point. Now, I might do a little more than that. I might tell them, I would show them how to pick up the gun, for example, with one hand to start with, and where to keep their index finger. But again, I would only have 3 key performance indicators. It would just be, like we talked in the other video, it would just be their thumb crotch high in the back strap. It would be the flip-off finger making contact with the bottom of the trigger guard so they have a proprioceptive index, and their index finger at home on the frame. But I'm standing right there, and I'm the one responsible for their safety. And then he explains, to keep it simple and brief sentences, maximize the hands-on by the student and hands-off by the instructor. Let them do it. If the student is having trouble with something, it's okay for them to struggle as long as they're safe, and you're going to be right there ensuring their safety. But let them struggle. Let them figure it out. Don't rescue them, and that's what he's repeating, and don't take over. He says, just bring the target up close. Sorry. Those are loud motorcycles. It's a nice day here in Tum Tum, so lots of people are out riding their motorcycles on the road. So one of the first things he recommends starting with, of course, is to determine the status of the handgun. What condition is it in? Loaded or unloaded? And how can they make it safe? And he just walks it through step by step. The thing he says to start with first is grip. And then after they've had a chance to press the trigger a few times while they're holding onto the gun, just pick one thing about their grip that would make it better for them. And then he walks you through a process for that. But I appreciate his approach. Now, Marcus Wynn was known, and you can read about him online if you like. He even has a Kindle book on Amazon that's a great read, and it's talked about the neural-based trainer and using what has been learned about how to quickly pick up skills and how to maximize those in the civilian realm, skills that were used to help forward operators and things like that pick up skills quickly in those contexts, applying those to private citizens as well. So anyway, I hope you'll enjoy that. One thing I wanted to read to you to end this random instructor hacks is when I first started teaching, it was hard for me to watch my students struggle. And it was hard for me to let them struggle. I don't want my students to struggle to the point of tears or absolute frustration, but I've learned that it's important for them to be able to work out the issue on their own as long as they're safe. And if they can't work it out on their own, they know I'm right there and I'm happy to help. And usually I'll help by maybe asking them a question, but whatever I can to help guide them through it after they've had a chance to work it out. So Andrew Huberman, he says, we want strokes to struggle through and figure out the challenge that they're facing. He says the struggle is a natural and normal part of the learning process, is an essential part of the learning process. And he says, if there's no friction, then there's no struggle. And if there's no struggle, then there's no learning. So I'll leave that with you for today. I hope you enjoyed the little blog post by Marcus Wynn. If you decide to try that tactic out the next time you take a friend to the range, please let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. All right, I'll see you next week.